Hello and welcome to this BBC Academy Taster session for approximately an hour. Good to see you all and welcome. Just want to say very quickly that this is actually sponsored and run by the BBC Academy. I'm not sure if you're all aware. I'm going to do a shameless plug here. The Academy is the BBC training department that offers a lot of skills courses, very practical skills courses, right across both the development and the production process. Do look us up on the website, very easy to find at the BBC Academy. Tasters actually is something that we have thought long and hard about and decided that we're actually going to start running some modules and coaching and workshops around those as well, with a plethora of other courses around a number of key production skills across the process. My name is Frank Ash. I'm a creative consultant from the BBC Academy. It's a great pleasure to be joined by both Sam Anthony and Tom. Just to say, Tom Edwards and Sam are both commissioners in the BBC, and they have asked me to say the following just so you get a sense of where they're coming from. Sam is the BBC Knowledge Commissioning Executive for Scottish Independent Companies. His recent credits include Terry Pratchett, Choosing to Die. Up and coming, I believe, in the very near future, Welcome to India for BBC Two. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah.
Also in his slate, Motorway Cops, Traffic Cops, and Neighbourhood Watched, all for BBC One, and Russell Brown on Addiction for BBC Three. I just thought we'd mention that so you can get some idea of where they're both coming from. Tom Edwards is a commissioning executive producer for BBC One and BBC Two for factual features and formats. His development and production slate ranges from do-it-yourself SOS, new formats like Alex Polizzi, The Fixer, quite recently aired on BBC Two, and also a plethora of cooking talent, including Nigel Slater and Rachel Koo. More of Rachel later. And just to say that as far as Tom's background is concerned, if you're a bit worried about this being a documentary festival, he also has a very prodigious background in both factual and documentary program making. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Now, in terms of the objectives, really quickly, just to give you a sense, is what we're going to be looking at over the hour is both exploring the role of tasters in selling new content ideas. We want to talk a lot about what makes a great taster in selling new content, and most important of all, perhaps, when to make them and how to make them. And I think I'd like to start in headline terms from both of you to ask you, there's an enormous amount of tasters being made, plethora of tasters, everyone's talking about tasters. Is this just a nice to have? Is it just a bit of a fad? Is this a passing phase? Or are tasters a really important, integral part of the way we need to sell new content these days?
It's just a passing phase. I think you don't need to listen to whatever. It's going to go on in the session. No, there's obviously a hell of a lot of tasters. I think as film and technology becomes cheaper, as editing technology becomes cheaper, I think commissioners will expect, because it'll be affordable for producers to supply them with more and more tasters and a better sense of material. I think that the bar is increasingly high as well. I saw a taster the other day that someone had used a jib shot in, which was kind of breathtaking.
Showing off.
Absolutely. You don't need to go quite that far, but I'm certain there'll be many more tasters.
Yeah, I actually slightly disagree. I don't think there are lots of tasters being made. I think there are some being made, and I think the smart companies and individual directors with projects to sell are either thinking about making them or are making them, but there still aren't as many as you might think. And I think that that's a mistake, because I think a piece of paper is a very, very inefficient way of selling your idea. It's a very, very bad way of telling someone what a television program is going to look or feel like and what it's going to consist of. Actually, the best way to do that is to actually show rather than tell. And part of our jobs is to read lots and lots and lots and lots of proposals, a lot of which are very well written about very interesting ideas, but I'd rather watch an amazing 4-minute tape. And then, if I'm interested, then turn to what is fast becoming, in some commissioners' minds, almost the small print, the detail, the actual sell, the splash, if you like, on the first thing you want to see. It can be really useful if it's a tape. Just very, very quickly, I've just met a lady who's just asked me about a project that she's working on, and she has shot what she says is lots of good tape, and my advice, and is looking to figure out how to get it to the next level. My advice would be, if you have some tape, think about making a taster tape, because it's a TV business, that's what, or a film business, and it's much better to show than it is to tell.
Can I ask you, just again in headlines, just to get the negatives out of the way, we're going to spend a lot of time now exploring what makes a good taster tape, and indeed what are the elements that you absolutely want in a taster. Can I just ask you, though, what don't you want to see in a taster? I mean, are there versions of tasters, or sometimes when actually you don't feel that it in any way has helped to sell that content?
I mean, Sam and I have Sam obviously commissioned in documentaries, whereas I commission into features and factual formats. We have slightly different needs from a taster anyway. I would, for me, if I read a treatment, there's sometimes 3 or 4 elements that really stand out in it for me. And for me, a taster that's doing the right kind of job will be bringing those to life. I'm probably not trying to be too much more ambitious than that, potentially. Sometimes you get tasters in that feel like they're attempted a cut show, and they might be like 20 minutes long or something, which is not only can be painful to watch, but also can beg more questions than you might want to. You almost want to tease people with these, tease commissioners with these to an extent.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's not being over ambitious necessarily, but really nailing the thing that you think is integral to the appeal of this idea.
Anything from you on the negatives?
I just don't want it to be too long. I mean, I think what Tom's saying is absolutely right. You probably don't have the budget, the time, the backup, the executive producing support or anything else to actually make a properly impressive version of your whole film at the taster tape stage. So don't try. You know, it's a marketing exercise as much as anything else. The only thing I would also say is that it can be quite annoying when someone sends you a taster tape and you say, well, it was a bit crap, really, wasn't it? And they go, yeah, I know, but it's only a taster tape. I mean, if you're going to do it really well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to cost you lots of money. And there are, 1 or 2 tips and techniques, hopefully, we can tell you about today that means you'll get your message across efficiently, it won't bankrupt you, and it will help you sell your idea.
Okay, and with that in mind, that's a great and excellent segue into the first clip. Can we see the first clip, please?
Fuck off! B245 LGK!
Get in the fucking cycle lane, you twat.
You got a whole lot of bit of road there! You're on camera! Oh, I'm very sorry, but...
That's to me, mate.
I'll drop you like a fucking bitch! Okay, you understand that, yeah? You fucking understand that?
Hey! Look!
Hey! Fucking hell!
You're fucking right, Andy, you cunt.
Mate,
You're in there, get all fucking look, you right on that back, I can't give a shit about
smile
that.
for the camera, mate. You're getting reported to the public carriage office. Get reported to the public carriage office.
Is that dangerous? Look, I can hit your bloody van! What? What the fuck? Unbelievable, he's just braked to try and make me crash on him! 3519 POC. I've got a camera, you twat! Jesus Christ!
Do that fucking again! Fucking yeah, go run, you bastard! Do it fucking again! Bang
Just
on my
drove
back.
into me.
What? What
You
did you
just
drive
drove
into?
into
You fucking idiot! I drove into you. Oh, oh.
So,
There you go. So Sam almost...
no cyclists were killed in the making of that programme, by the way. That guy didn't die at the end. He was quite hurt, but he wasn't dead.
I'm glad you told us that's almost a superfluous question.
Yeah.
What was it that excited you when you saw this?
I mean, I've seen a lot of tapes. I think that's one of the best taste tapes I've ever seen, and it's a really interesting example to talk about because I've seen it a couple of times before it got pitched to Danny Cohen, who's the head of BBC One, and we showed him the tape, and he just commissioned it straight away on the spot. He just said, "Well, yeah, fine, great, we'll do it."
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there aren't many tapes that are as strong and as heavy as that tape. But that tape brooks no argument. You know, you show someone that tape and they're like, well, how are you not going to make a film about that subject? Mm-hmm. You know, and in the tape, I think what's really important to unpack really is in that tape, what they've done is they've proved lots of different things. They've proved that there's loads of this footage out there. Because it's just full of amazing footage, and it's really interesting watching you all gasp and put your hands over your eyes and stuff when the clips play out, because of course that's what we want the audience at home to do when they're watching the programme. If we're going to put something on at 9 o'clock on BBC One, and that programme will go out at 9 o'clock on BBC One, we're competing against dramas that might bring in an audience of 6 or 7 million people. So the subject has got to be pretty strong, you know. So I think the tape proves that, but then also the subtitling, which is, I think, very well done in this tape. It bottoms out the story in two ways. One with some statistics, not loads of statistics, but some key statistics. And also the subtitles move the argument on. There's sort of 3 or 4 different sections to the tape. So it's not all just ballistic footage. It actually has some footage from the cyclist's point of view, some footage from the driver's point of view, and some quite fun stuff that you sort of feel is a guilty pleasure to watch, and some stuff that's pretty stomach-churning to watch. So you feel that when you're watching that and we're trying to make a decision about is that the kind of thing we'd want to do, well, you know, we still got to go and make the programme and get the tone and the balance of that right, but it's a really, really, really good start.
Mm. It's interesting, actually. I know that's TXing shortly.
Yeah.
And it's funny, obviously this session's about taster tapes, but I suppose in terms of the development of an idea beyond the taster tape, just briefly, I know that Todd at Leopard, actually how you then build the show, have you had conversations with Todd about how?
Yeah, no, I know all about it. I mean, basically, the process started with one clip from YouTube. There are a lot of these cyclists now, partly for their own security, using head cams, because if you cycle to work every day in London, you'll know what it's like. Todd, who's the executive producer, had one clip. I can't remember which one it was. He showed it to Charlotte Moore, I think, at BBC. She said, that's pretty amazing. Is there anything else out there? So then he went away, and all that material, every single frame of the material there is on YouTube in the public domain. They didn't pay for any of it. It was all downloaded for free, and that tape. So essentially, the message that you need to get from that tape is it was pretty much done for nothing, cost nothing to make that tape, beyond the manpower to actually put it together. Yeah. I think the challenge for the filmmakers now is that it's actually been quite a hard programme to make, because although they've acknowledged all the themes and all the different things that are going on, and actually it's quite a hard film to make, because the people who shoot the footage are all geeks and they're really not very good talkers. So the kind of person who's going to have a helmet on their a camera on their helmet, when they come to then interview them about the story and try and open the story out, they're often really awkward talkers and are not the best people to tell the story.
But I think, again, you know, what's so powerful about it as well is that they don't attempt in any way to dilute the power of the material itself.
No, they do the
by
opposite.
hinting at the structure, the format, the way in which a programme, an episode might work.
But it's a very clever tape because it's an exercise in shock and awe, but there is real structure and structural ideas and hints of a structure to come for the film as the long form version that are all embedded in there in a very attractive package that keeps you watching and keeps you gasping, which is, I think, it's very good. It's very good.
I mean, in a very different way, we commissioned a two-parter last year that went out on BBC Two at 9 o'clock on Sunday night, which was, it came in to us in terms of this notion of you not need to spend a lot on a taster tape. It came into us just as some footage of, it was somebody diving underwater with crocodiles, somebody filming with crocodiles underwater. And so the material itself was just this kind of eerie, primeval animal gliding along. It was an amazing space to be. And again, in terms of nailing the 1 or 2 things that are absolutely key to an idea, the opportunity to spend time in that world was what was key to this idea, to be that close to dinosaur to a dinosaur, to crocodiles. It begged a lot of questions. You wanted to know why someone was down there filming with a crocodile, how they were able to, etc. But it came to us literally as some footage off YouTube, or I think it was about 2 minutes worth of footage of uncut of someone diving with a crocodile. It registered with us so much. We took it to the channel, and we didn't have slots at that time, so we couldn't commission at that time. About 8-9 months later, slots became available. We took it back. We'd all remembered it in the team because it created such an impact, just this footage off YouTube. And then we went on to build a program around it. We added Ben Fogle because we wanted to see it. We wanted to throw him in the water with crocodiles. And it went on to do really well on BBC Two. So again, finding the great footage.
It's the power of the power of the tape is that you never forgot the tape.
Absolutely.
It's very rare that you'll read a treatment and not be able to get it out of your head and still be thinking about it 9 months later. Whereas to watch a little film, even if it's 2 minutes long, that's a much better way of trying to get it lodged in someone's brain, isn't it?
So it's a really important thought then, if you're thinking about making a taste test, what is the big memorable message that you're going to get across, and how will you make it memorable in that respect?
I think it's really important to think about the structure of the tape and the way that you lay out the exposition of what the idea is, as well as proving that you've got access to really amazing footage. I mean, I think there's a couple of case studies we'll talk about today, but yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Tom, can I just move on a bit in terms of your world of features and formats, and particularly thinking about new talent? I know that the cookery genre is a very packed and crowded one. Do you get a lot of unsolicited taster tapes with offering you new talent?
Yeah, it's funny. I was wondering about whether or not to show this clip initially because it's obviously a doc audience and not a features audience. I also look after some food talent on BBC Two and on BBC One. But there's a lot that is relevant to tasters and talent generally. We on BBC Two have arguably the strongest food talent on TV, and yet we're known for doing food obviously on Two, and so we get a lot of unsolicited talent tapes in. Any tape that comes to us, the notion of bringing that talent forward means that you're going to have to displace, in terms of the hours that you've got available, one of your other talents. That means that we'd have to choose not to show Rick Stein, or not to show Raymond Blanc, or not to show Lorraine Pascal, the Hairy Bikers, whatever. So they really need to be strong for us to make that decision. And so we tend to get a hell of a lot of tapes in that are, it's impossible to tell the difference between any of them really.
They can all cook.
It's some kind of fella, or sometimes a female, possibly slightly overweight, sometimes, other times not. They'll be in a fairly identical kitchen. They may have a specialism, which is that they like to particularly use raw meat and eat it with, God knows. It's this plethora, because you also get sent in by some people that go fishing for this talent. You get sent in, like, say, 10 talents back to back. And it's impossible to see through them all and to think, this person has to go on in place of somebody else. So this taster tape came in, was the one that by far, took it. She went to screen on the basis partly.
Can we see the next clip, the next taster, please? Thank you.
I'm from Croydon, and I moved to Paris 5 years ago. When I was a kid, I didn't eat much French food. It was hard to meet people at the beginning when you don't speak any French. The hardest people to cook for are chefs. They're really difficult, especially if they're French chefs. When I say I cook professionally, they don't believe that I cook professionally. They say, like, you're English, you can't cook. But then when I explain to them that I've trained in Paris, that I studied at a culinary school, I studied French patisserie, then they soften up because it's French patisserie. One of the first things we learnt to make at culinary school was how to make tart pastry. This is like, I made it myself. It's just like some, like a little kind of drawers with a chopping board on top. But you do what you have to do to make your kitchen work. And most Parisian kitchens are like this. Quiche Lorraine is very easy to do, and it's simple and it's tasty. It's not much. You just need some pastry, you need some bacon, eggs and cream. That's it. That is creme fraiche. That's full fat, and that's not diet version, okay? I mean, I see my food more with how the whole bistro thing is going. So you're taking the classic French coq au vin, for instance. Why don't we change it a little bit and make it a bit more fun? You could do a barbecue version. So you do chicken on a barbecue stick, and then you make a red wine marinade. You marinate it and you make a little sauce with it, and it's coq au vin. It's got all the flavors of coq au vin, but it's The format, the way you present it is a bit different. It's a bit more fun. And it's not snobby. It's not snobby at all, which a lot of people think French food is. It should be a pleasure to eat. It should be enjoyable. I'm sure if you were to calculate the calories, it's not that bad. C'est tout. That's it.
Less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, so it's obviously Plum that made that taster felt very, wanted to invest in that talent. They felt, they came to us and asked for some development money. We'd not yet seen her, and we didn't have anything available at the time, and they went ahead anyway and funded it themselves because they were so confident in her. But for me, what was fantastic about that taster is that it really, it sold the whole story, really. It had so many of the different elements that you might get in a great treatment or whatever. They brought to life Amélie, so we could absolutely see a program that drew on her lifestyle in Paris, the notion of this tiny kitchen, this English girl that had taken herself there, that was ambitious, that was trying to make herself in Paris. And it was a very rounded offer. It also, for us, one of the challenges when you're commissioning for any channel is knowing that the person that's making the program for you, wants to make the program for you, understands the channel, because if they don't, it's a pain in the backside when you get into production. And you end up spending a hell of a lot of time in post trying to make a show that will work for your channel. And so even little kind of indicators like the choice of the right kind of music, the choice of the right kind of pace, sense of humour, commentary, it can really indicate to commissioners, reassure commissioners that this person understands the channel. So much about that was right for BBC Two. It was also useful because I think it allowed us, it was a great platform for conversation, further conversation, creative conversation around it. Where we ultimately went with the show is that we didn't want it only to live in that world of Amélie. Paris is a great place to go and be, but it's a contemporary city. It's not just a Paris of the kind of 50s, which a lot of that music was. So it also formed the useful platform for us to think about how the show could develop. So that's another really useful way in which tasters can serve a great purpose. And as a producer, if you're bringing a taster to a commissioner, I wouldn't, if for yourselves, I wouldn't necessarily pretend that you feel it's perfect. Allow it to be the basis of a discussion. Contribute your own thoughts about where you might take it. Again, all of that will reassure a commissioner that you're engaging with somebody that is, somebody that's critically capable, which is all reassuring.
And I really appreciate and like the point that you're making, this idea that it is to see taste as almost but a further development tool in which then you can use that as a starting point for an even more involved conversation, more input from commissioners like yourselves in terms of how you're now going to move it on. And I think actually, Sam, there's quite a lot of examples, aren't there, of where a first taster has come to you as a commissioner, won't go straight on to the controller, because your input then becomes really important with that production team or those producers.
I mean, the producers that I have a dialogue, I mean, even producers I don't have a dialogue with, but generally it works best when it's people that I'm speaking to, and I know a little bit, I may never have worked with them before, but the running order roughly goes, we think we've got an idea and we think it'll be really good, and if it's an idea that very quickly makes you say, well, okay, show me, and they need to show you, then what I would say to them is, can you put something on tape? And that might be something as simple as an interview with somebody on video Skype. I mean, really simple. In other words, not a taster tape, but some material. It might be sharks, crocodiles off YouTube. It might be something really, really simple. Now, you have to have a relationship with the commissioning editor in order to get into that dialogue. But then, on the basis of that, we would then sort of say, yeah, there's something really interesting in this. Why don't you have a go at making a tape? Now, we may or we may not give them some money to do that. Often we don't give them money to do it because we regard it increasingly as part of their R&D, at least in the first iteration. Yeah. Then if they do a tape and we like it, it may still not be right for my purposes, because what I need to do with that tape is then sell it up. And the next point in the kind of pecking order, this is only in British TV, by the way, for people who are from international, from other countries. What I then have to do with it is then get that tape up to the level where I can put it in a machine in the office of the head of BBC One or BBC Two with about 10 people in there and watch it with them. And that's quite nerve-wracking, but what you want to do, obviously with the tape, like with the first one, with the bicycle one, is for that process to nail it right there and then in the room. So we do work. I don't want it to sound like we spend loads. Not only have you got to develop your programs, you've also got to spend months in development just for the tapes. But we do help the companies develop the tapes. And in fact, I think that's what we're going to talk about now.
Yes, I think we've got a good example. Just tell us the background to this.
So the background to this is last year I was lucky enough to executive produce a program called Terry Pratchett Choosing to Die, which was about Terry Pratchett exploring suicide, really, for people, terminally ill people. He himself has Alzheimer's and has to make the difficult decision about whether he's going to kill himself before he gets to Alzheimer's to make that decision. And we made that film, and it won lots of awards. And Radio Times said it was the most important 5 minutes of television in 20 years, I think, which was quite nice. And it won a BAFTA last week. And so we wanted to do a follow-up with Terry. And Terry is increasingly ill, actually. He's really not very well at all. He wants to do one more film. And the film he wants to do, we were a bit iffy about, which was basically 25 years ago, before he was ill, he went and did a nature program in Sumatra about orangutans. And he really loved it, really enjoyed it, so much so that his principal character in most of his novels since is an orangutan librarian. I don't know the books, I've never read them, but apparently orangutans feature very largely in his work now. And so what he wanted to do was to go back to Borneo, I think it is, and see if he could meet this enormous monkey, this enormous orangutan called Kushasi that he met last time, and see if he was still alive. And that was about it, really. And perhaps along the way have a bit of a meditation about, life and love and the universe.
Okay, and that takes us up to the first tape.
So they talked to me about that, Keo Films this was, and I said, well, of course we're interested, and we'll look at anything you want to put together, but it's a bit unfocused, it's a bit unclear. Right. So have a go at doing a tape. So they did a tape, and this is the first version.
So can we see the next clip? Thank you.
You wonder what they're thinking about. You wonder what they think about all this. I can't hide the fact that I don't like to see animals in captivity. People had heard Kasasi calling. Dominant male orangutans have a thing called the long call. The best way I can describe it, it's like whale song, but it's coming out of the sky. And even that is nothing like it. It sounds like the forest itself is going, and some people would say the orangutan is the forest and the forest is the orangutan. I turned a corner, and here was this orangutan. An absolute giant. And I thought, this is no time to debate who is the dominant species on this planet. So I stood aside, and he just went past, gave me a look, and it was a human look. I mean, it was a look of a person. What fascinates me is we share an awful lot of our genes with orangutan. I suppose when you think you might be on the brink of extinction, you have sympathy with anybody else. Conservation has changed in recent years. There are new threats and new challenges. I would very much like to find out where Kasasi is now. He's a sort of piece of unfinished business in my life. There's a kind of narrative, and a narrative has got to have a nice ending. Or at least it's got to have an ending. I've had to think about death for quite a long time. So I think it would be a nice idea to be thinking about life.
So, Sam, what was your first thoughts, considerations?
So we saw the tape, and I really liked it, and obviously we wanted to do something with Terry. We definitely want to do something with Keo, because they're, you know, a phenomenal company. And we just thought it was a bit muddled. And we just thought, oh, just thought there's all sorts of interesting ideas in there, isn't there? There's Terry, and there's monkeys, and there's the going back, and you know, forests, and you know, there's all sorts of stuff in there, but it wasn't in any special order. And in actual fact, the stuff that was really interesting, we thought, was the theme of extinction, and that doesn't come till the end. So we had a meeting about it, and we said we want to talk to Janice, who's the head of BBC Two, about it, but we don't think it's right yet, and she's got a mind like a trap, so she'll just pick holes in it because she'll think it's not argued through. So we had a chat about it, we rewrote the script, we rewrote the cards, and actually, I was very, very involved in that. I kind of sat down with Craig, and we really went through it bit by bit, completely restructured. Well, you be the judge. We restructured it quite a lot. All the same elements, and again, on this cost issue, the only thing that they shot was a little bit of interview. They went to a little zoo with an orangutan, where you saw Terry, and then they shot a bit of him in a park, which is where it looks a bit jungly. The rest of it's all found footage, so again, didn't cost a lot of money.
But the trick so often, isn't it, has been absolutely clear. What exactly is this story you're
Yeah, I mean, you know, there was a 2 or 3 month period between the two versions of the taster tape, and in that period, we had a couple of conversations like, what's it really about? What's it really about? It's not, you know, there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of films where celebrities go on basically holiday to go and meet some animals, and we definitely didn't want that. I mean, we really didn't want that. So what we wanted was a sense of what the themes and what the overarching. Can you have an overarching subtext? I'm not sure, but you know what the subtext was going to be. So let's see. Well, let's see exactly. Let's see if the second version answers that a bit. Good. So look at the title, "Facing Extinction." So that was the first big thing for us.
I've had to think about death for quite a long time. So I think it'd be a nice idea to be thinking about life.
You wonder what they're thinking about. You wonder what they think about all this. I can't hide the fact that I don't like to see animals in captivity. Dominant male orangutans have a thing called the long call. The best way I can describe it, it's like whale song, but it's coming out of the sky. And even that is nothing like it. It sounds like the forest itself is going, and some people would say the orangutan is the forest and the forest is the orangutan. I turned a corner, and here was this orangutan. An absolute giant. And I thought, this is no time to debate who is the dominant species on this planet. So I stood aside, and he just went past, gave me a look. And it was a human look. I mean, it was a look of a person. What fascinates me is we share an awful lot of our genes with orangutan. He is either still around. People have said recently that they've heard a call which they think is his, or possibly his skeleton is there somewhere. I do not know. You just wonder why we are considered as a whole the biggest predators in the world, and they aren't. What spark grew in humanity didn't actually find an outlet in the higher apes.
anticipations changed in recent years. There are new threats and new challenges. I would very much like to find out where Kasasi is now. He's a sort of piece of unfinished business in my life. There's a kind of narrative, and a narrative has got to have a nice ending. Or at least it's got to have an ending. I suppose when you think you might be on the brink of extinction, you have sympathy with anybody else.
I mean, I hope you can appreciate the difference. I mean, basically what we led with was the idea of extinction. And just by doing that, then everything else that comes after it feels like another layer of one basic idea. Whereas before it was a whole load of different layers and there was all good material there. I mean, we basically just repackaged all the same material. I think the other thing very quickly that's really important talking about is the cards. I'm not, just generally, I think it's a really bad idea to use voiceover on taster tapes. Really bad idea. And it's because, again, you don't want people to think this is a program, it's a tape. And if you use captions, funny enough, there's lots of festival films tend to use captions and not voiceover. It allows you to project your own ideas about what the voice of the piece will be. Now, with Terry, obviously you've got a voice, which is his voice, so that's fine. You don't need another one. And actually, the other thing I think that's really important is if you use cards and you end up writing rather well-written cards, and I'm quite proud of those cards, I think they're quite good, they do a good job. It's nice to be able to read them, actually.
And presumably there's a real danger that if they don't like your particular choice of voiceover, that could actually...
So for example, imagine you had that tape and you had my ghastly voice on there or something, you might go, oh, God, I hate that voice. Yeah. Terrible. Right. You know, and then actually you've killed it, dead, and you've done all this other really good work. Actually, you know, there's nothing more neutral than just text.
And it's quite difficult as well, I think, when you're watching a taster tape, when you're encountering a lot of new material, to actually to try and digest the voiceover track as well when you're trying to watch the material itself. It can just be quite tough to take in the two at the same time. I think it will force you to be more economical as well with the amount of information you try and put in. If you are putting it on cards, you'll tend to write more tightly and so on. So it's a much concise, more directed, more focused way of communicating.
So keeping it simple.
Keeping it simple, but it is even that tape, and I do think it has a real atmosphere, that tape, which is part of the challenge. But it's a marketing exercise. It's like it's like a car advert or something. I mean, in the way they use the cards, the way they use the music, it's an advert basically. Sure. It's not the film.
Good.
Or it's a pre-title in a way. I mean, sometimes taster tapes can work well if they, as can treatments. So often you get treatments and you'll read the front page of a treatment and you just won't have a clue what the show is or how on earth it's meant to come together. It'll just be some thoughts on an area of interest. But with a taster, it's in the same way that a pre-title needs to work for an audience. It's the first engagement a viewer will have with this subject, and you need to communicate quite succinctly why you should stay with this show for the next 60 minutes on the BBC. A taster can work in the same way, just to begin to flesh out the key things that are most important succinctly, that will demand that you then ask further questions.
Sure.
We commissioned that, by the way, and it was commissioned again in the room. Janice saw it at BBC Two and said, oh, wow, great, yeah, okay, take it. And she'd never heard anything about it, and she took it straight away. So,
good. Well, that just is pretty positive.
Yeah.
Tom, can we think about perhaps a slightly more tricky sell in the area of formats in particular? If people are trying to come up with an innovative format approach, a structured program, how hard do they need to work within that taster to try and make the structure, the format points come alive to you?
Well, again, I think it's about the degree of ambition that you want in a tape. And again, obviously, the kind of content that I commission is distinct from some of Sam's content. I obviously do look at formats as well. And so, for me, there's a different sort of ask. Again, I'd be wary of too much ambition, because if you try and make a mini show, you'll never pull it off. And it will just it'll feel underwhelming. If you take that into a channel controller, it's better to see something that's less ambitious, that packs a bigger punch, than something that's over ambitious and that falls down. So, I mean, we've got a taster that we'll watch in a moment, which grew to become a format. I mean, it's actually more instructive, I suppose, for the audience at Sheffield DocFest, because it was brought to us as a piece of doc access to the world of the food inspection agencies, the various food inspection agencies. And in prime time, there's not that much straight documentary content in prime time on one. I mean, there's obviously things like traffic cops, which do really well, that are really dependable. They pack a hell of a lot of punch. You're guaranteed arrests and possibly, loss of life, all sorts of great drama that, again, Sam was referencing before, a lot of this kind of content needs to punch its weight up against things like Holby City or whatever, or dramas with good high quality production values and a lot of action. So it can be tough in prime time for doc content to pack the punch that's required. And this was illustrative of that, of the way that whereas ITV, I think, can take a little bit of docu-soap content. They've got like that Safari Vets thing, and they've got Poms in Paradise. They've got some kind of doc content in prime time. BBC One, it's more difficult to get away with that kind of content. So we needed to grow from this doc content. So this was a tape that Betty brought in. Initially, they brought it in, and it was just doc access, and it felt very much like what they were offering was going to be a docu-soap, and it didn't pack the punch. We loved the territory and tried to work with them so that they could communicate actually some of the key things that would allow this idea to grow and become bigger than just some stuff that happened to be taking place in some places of the country with some food inspectors.
Let's see the next clip, thank you.
First place we're going to today is Broadway Wines. Okay, right, this one is actually a counterfeit. So once I've found one, I'm going to have to look at all the stock. Right, this one is Pinot Grigio, and that's meant to be Pinot Grigio. Look at the difference in the bottles. If you look at the difference in the height of the bottles, this is the genuine here. You know, as a customer, you wouldn't notice a difference at all. It's only when you've got them side by side that you can see. This one says drink responsibly, and this one will say drink responsibly. And another one. Looks like I've got quite a lot of work here. That's another one, that's another box there. This brand of vodka we know has been counterfeited in the past, and we have found high levels of methanol in some of it. Methanol is dangerous. But I'll send one off and get it tested. Okay.
Next we're getting to a complaint from a member of the public about a small retail premises. The shop's allegedly having a refit, and because of the refit, all the food is on sale from outside. Are you the manager of the shop?
Yes, sir.
I had a complaint here today about food allegedly being sold from outside the premises. You're not open for any business at the moment.
I'm quite worried.
Are you?
Yeah, because I've never had somebody legal come before.
Now you have got some bottles and things on the floor outside. Just get them picked up if you can.
Picked up right now.
Because we don't want any sort of attraction to any pests or rats or mice or anything like that.
Not at all. My heart was racing then. I'm trying to work with you guys.
No, of course, and
we'd
always work with you.
I've got palpitations.
Oh. Do you want to have a sit down? Are you all right?
Sharon's going to go and make a selection from the bread that's on retail sale, and then I'm going to check the accuracy of them on the scales. Okay, do we know what that is?
Yep, it's a small bloomer.
Yep. This is the bit which I say is a dark art. I actually really like this because it's very black and white. It's either correct or it isn't. Because it's determined by the scales. Yeah, that group I've just done there, the nominal quantity for a large loaf like that will be 800 grams. Some are reading down at about 796.
Have you got a basement? Yeah. Can I have a quick look down there just before we get into it? So immediately you've got droppings all the way along there, quite a lot of them. Mice, they're very greasy. Wherever they run, consistently, they'll leave a brown trail behind them, so you can see where they've been, basically. The strange thing is, you've got mouse droppings all over the sticky trap, but no mouse. So there's mouse droppings on there as well. So they're near the food area, food prep area. We're starting to get droppings on things now. So we're getting towards the realms of closing you down, to be honest, sir. My wife works in fashion. She works for Vogue, so it's a bit of a contrast. Whenever I meet our friends, they're always quite disgusted by what I do.
What's the most alarming thing that you've found in a product?
This is one that we just took out of the fridge, which was a yoghurt that actually when it came in, the customer thought a piece of human knuckle was in it.
Tom?
Cool. It was, I mean, again, as Sam said earlier, that demonstrated the viability of a lot of the content for us. I mean, there was a concern, I suppose, in commissioning something like this that are you just going to spend your entire time in kebab houses? It's kind of a bit of a tired precinct, and it's very familiar. You are not surprised remotely by that, and not all of us, not all of us, have that many kebabs. And so we really wanted to demonstrate that, with this taster, that you could go into precincts that we're more familiar and more relatable to a broader BBC One audience. There's a real demand on universality for a big primetime BBC One show. So, getting into the place with the wine, that was really useful. They experimented with the notion of, again, for us, being a department that won't just put out straight to doc content. We need to kind of, build features content around it. They began to experiment with how they could communicate information, the range of information that you could communicate. So it was kind of nodding to a lot of the different elements that would go into making the programme, the use of graphics, intelligent characters. It was, again, it was useful as a kind of to build the platform for a conversation, because, we were able to talk about music. I mean, the music in there, it starts with some kind of Aphex Twin track and then becomes Bolero by Ravel, neither of which are classic Heartland BBC One soundtrack choices. But again, it allows you to begin that conversation. We also talked about the graphics. The graphics were a little bit kind of maybe too flesh crawly, ultimately, and so we ended up going into a more kind of forensic crime scene approach with the graphics, because again, for Heartland BBC One, that's useful. So you're allowed to have you're enabled to have all of these conversations because you've got a great little piece of material to work with. It also, I mean, and again, instructive for a DocFest audience, it also showed the limitations of that content, I think. You weren't sitting as rooted to your seats as you were for the bike sequence earlier. And there was laughs, obviously, when it's 4 grams down on a loaf of bread or whatever. I don't imagine people will be taking that loaf back and trying to get the money back. Actually, and what it meant to us, it meant that we needed to begin a conversation with Betty about how we would grow this into something that had the kind of scale that it would need to work in prime time on One. It meant, in brief, it meant that we ultimately, those elements, those access docs, in fact, the thing that was brought to us initially became the third strand in the show that became the Food Inspectors. We brought in 2 big consumer talents in Matt Allwright and Chris Hollins that had distinct roles. Matt was very investigative. Chris Hollins was bringing it to you in your own home. Again, the importance of relatability on One and a universal precinct. The 2 of those also helped brand the show and give it a sense of authority that it might not have had. As I say, rather than being some stuff that happens to be taking place in some parts of the UK, in some shops, it then became the Food Inspectors, a solid consumer brand that really felt like the BBC is dealing with this issue almost in a national way. So we grew and built around that doc content that was great, and it was the beginning of a creative conversation. But ultimately, it played the third tier in the format because it didn't pack as much punch as you need in prime time on One. But all of these things were, possible when we saw this tape and worked with them through it. I think that was probably about £5,000 worth of development. For us in terms of conversations, we would ask what is your ambition for this tape? What should we aspire for? And how much is it going to cost you? Is that like 2 weeks of a PD? Is that like 1 week in an edit? Can you cut it in your own facility? And we'll work with you to work out something that we can get to for about that kind of sum. Is the kind of sum that we normally pay, 5, sometimes 10, but generally kind of around that. We
don't generally pay for taster tapes. What we might pay for is a bit of extended development, and then we'll expect some tape as a result of that. But it will be probably a bit more involved. We've got a good tape with us today, but it's about 10 minutes long, and that's about £20,000 worth of development, and that's kind of proof that they've done all the things we wanted them to do. And that's a sort of a separate conversation. That's a kind of a different sort of tape. I mean, I think that, I mean, if we were asked, what's the one, what I don't know what Tom's would be, my top tip really would simply be just do it, just go out and just make them. And the first few you make won't be that good, and you need to hone your skills at making it. And I think if you know anyone who can get you access to tapes or look for, there are lots of, actually, funny enough, there are lots of festival documentary taster tapes out on there. Not so many telly ones, but lots of the ones that are in Meat Market, I think, are on Vimeo and stuff. Just watch a lot of them and just do it. I mean, really, that's the only way to get.
Absolutely, it's equally. You get a hell of a load of CVs in if you're crewing for productions and whatever. And the best way for someone to improve their CV is just by looking at a load of other CVs and seeing which ones stand out and why. And the same with taster tapes. I mean, I suppose if I had to pick one thing, I suppose it would be just make sure, you said it earlier, just make sure that you really identify what is the key thing that is really most compelling, the thing that excites you most about this idea, and that you think therefore will excite the commissioners. And then make sure that you nail that, make sure that you get that in there. Keep it quite simple, and that's what's going to demand that a conversation continues after that. Like, don't make it too long, it's not necessary.
Thank you both for the moment. We have got time for a few questions, so I think there's a mic doing the round. So any questions to both Sam and Tom? There's some hands going up straight away. Good, thank you.
Sorry, I missed the bit about the ideal length. So what is too long and what is too short?
Well, I think the answer to that question is you've got to be honest with yourself about what the ideal length is. I'd hate to say 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 6 minutes. I mean, I don't know, I can't really remember how long any of those tapes are, but hopefully that's not what you're thinking about when you're watching them. And, you're not thinking, well, this is more than 3 minutes. I mean, if you're enjoying the tape, I think a good way to determine what the length of the tape should be, frankly, is to show it to other people. Show it to your friends, or show it to the people you work with or you work for. Or
if they nod off, it's too long.
And if they nod off, it's too long. Because actually, all we're trying to do is try and gauge the reaction that an audience to this kind of material will have. I think one thing I should say is that part of the reason why we do these tapes and part of the reason why there's a growing interest in them is because when we sit down, the final decision always comes from, in British broadcasting, the final decision always comes from the channel head. And by watching a tape that you hope is a good tape, with the channel head in the room, unfortunately, there's about 10 other people in the room. There's loads of bloody flunkies and people with clipboards and all these people. And just the act of watching a tape like that bicycle one with loads of other people in the room, you can see the channel controllers they sort of look around and they clock what other people are making of it. If people laugh, great. If people gasp, fantastic. It's a very, 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 very micro-focus group of how an audience might respond to that kind of material. So,
and I suppose, just to I suppose equally...
But not longer than 10 minutes.
I think, and it also depends on the state at which the conversation is with whoever it is that you're sending it to. I mean, initially, it might be, for me, you can kind of work out within 2 minutes, certainly, if you are interested in this and you want to keep going with it. So certainly, as an initial kind of foray, for me, I would incline toward the short. You can always then extend if you do want to take to a channel controller. But initially, you should be able to hook someone's attention within a relatively short period of time. No pre-titles longer than 2 minutes.
I was going to say, go back to that really nice thought you gave us about, think about it as almost as a pre-title sequence.
Yeah, and pre-titles when you watch them on telly and they drag on and on and on, they're really awful. So
a good pre-title.
A good pre-title, yeah, 90 seconds, 2 minutes.
Very few pre-titles are more than 2 minutes. Yeah. The Apprentice, I think, is 2 minutes, but it's quite unusual, actually, 2 minutes. Normally about 90 seconds. Now, I'm not saying the taste tape should be 90 seconds, but the discipline involved in making it short, it will help you distill the idea. Good. And that's the point, really.
Good, thank you. Another question.
Tom, you mentioned 4 key points for a treatment and that you should nail them in the taster tape. I just wondered what they were, and Sam, if it's different for what you're looking for.
I guess I just said something that was slightly unintelligible, you know what I mean? Then, for me, I suppose the point I was making is if I read through a treatment, there will be 3 or 4 things that really stand out, if it's a good treatment. There'll be 3 or 4 things that stand out for me within that treatment, and they'll be different depending on what the idea is. I suppose, I was talking earlier about...
Why don't you use the example of the food inspectors? There's 4 sections, aren't there? That's a good example of what they might be, isn't it?
And or equally, Rachel Koo, that for me was the sense that, you've got someone who is living this dream lifestyle. That was very evident. She just looked, you imagine that she's got some gorgeous French boyfriend, and she just lived this delicious life, just scoffing great cakes but never putting on weight. So there were certain things. I mean, the lifestyle around here was great. Her warmth, her accessibility, her down-to-earth nature was fantastic. The notion of an English person abroad, the visual, they brought the visual to life. So there were 3 or 4 things that went on to be key in the programme, and they demonstrated most of them, captured most of them within that taster. So I think that's what's key. It's picking up the 3 or 4 things that you really want to nail and then making sure they're in the taster.
And therefore that sense, isn't it, about what is the, and it goes back to where you started, what's going to be the really memorable quality? What's the big message that you want to get across?
Yeah. Well, what's the proposition? You know, I mean, one of the challenges we have in docs, perhaps even slightly more than in features, is people will often come and good people with lots of good track record, and they'll come and they'll pitch a precinct, an area of life. They'll say, like, well, why don't we do the Tube, the London Underground? Well, we did in fact do the Tube, and there is an amazing taster tape for the Tube. We haven't got time to show it, but what the taster tape did was say, it helped them define what the proposition was. It's not enough to just say, we've got access to something. Well, you know, clearly you have, otherwise we wouldn't be having the conversation. It's what are you going to do with the access? And so whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 key points about what you're going to do with that access, that's what you need to get in the treatment, and that's what you need to get in the taster tape.
And what about this sense, which is becoming more and more important for everybody in commissioning, is why now? You know, this sense of,
well, that's part of the proposition.
What makes it immediate?
Yeah.
What makes this something that you can transmit now and the public will relate?
Yeah. So on the Tube, for example, I don't know if any of you saw it, but on the Tube, for example, it was, well, it's 2012, it's the Olympics, it's massive infrastructural change, it's, you know, Crossrail. There were loads of reasons, but they put them all in the treatment, and they also put them all in the taster tape. And they also wanted to let you know that they were going to talk to everyone from people who tear tickets all the way up to the CEO, and they were all in the tape. So you were like, great, now I know what it is.
Very good. Any other questions? One at the front here.
Hi, yeah, a question for both of you, but Sam in particular. I was just wondering, are you open to receiving taster tapes from independent director producers, or would you, as a rule, prefer to see them coming through sort of production companies? That
No, really open to getting tapes from anybody. I actually like getting tapes because they're quick to watch. I mean, you know, treatments take a long time to read. They take you guys a long time to write, and they actually take an awfully long time to read if you read them properly, because most treatments that come in the first draft of them don't do the job they're completely set out to do. So you've got to read them, but you've also got to be like really concentrating when you're reading it to try and figure out what it is that they actually want to, what you actually want to make. I think a good taster tape can cut through a lot of that. I do think that some production companies, and Betty, who did the Food Inspector one, they're masters of the tape. They do everything on tape. They can help you. So if you can get them interested with your putative version of a tape and then get them interested enough to help you make an even better one, that can't hurt. But no, I mean, you know, people do send me tapes all the time. And
I'll
always
want to see a treatment accompany that taster, or just the taster on its own?
Honestly, truthfully, I'm happy to look at a tape. And then, you know, you would the next step obviously say, well, okay, fine, that's the broad headlines, but what about the detail? And but yeah, I mean, I think what's going to happen in the next 5 years is it's going to be. I don't think you'll be able to pitch anything without a tape. Honestly, I really don't.
Tom, anything to add?
It's slightly different given the nature of the kind of output that I look after. I think initially. Because of the need for things to be big, more than just characters, or more than just a straightforward access thing or whatever for prime time on one, and two, I think that for us it's a tape as a nice glimpse, as I say, like something like that crocodile thing. If that had come in on paper, the notion of swimming crocodiles, it would not have had anywhere near as much power. So that as something to grab your attention, and then a treatment to support it, and then a conversation going forward about what one might attempt to put into a tape. You know, those conversations that we're having all the time when we move into development. But happy to get them. As Sam said, the advantage of coming through an indie is that they'll have a hell of a lot of experience. They'll have expertise.
And they have our ear as well, because we you know, they're the people we speak to most.
They'll be making some shows for us already.
Yeah.
So it can be useful, but then there's obviously issues with yourselves in terms of ownership of ideas. And those
but the best way to vouchsafe the ownership of an idea is to make a really great tape that shows that you had the idea. I mean, it's, you know, the process of making the tape will make your idea more copyrightable, not less. And I think that's, you know, I mean, and there are good examples. Rob Leach last year made a film called My Brother the Islamist, and that started as a taster tape that he made at film school, and he sent it in and it got made. So, and he ended up being put with a decent exec and stuff. But I mean, yeah, that's what happened. He made it himself, sent it in, and it was fantastic. So,
and on that very positive note, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Just to say, Sam and Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.